What does an ideal marriage even look like? It's a question people have been asking forever. But what if the answer wasn't about finding the perfect romantic partner, but about embarking on a shared spiritual journey? Today, we're diving into this really fascinating guide from a 20th century Hindu tradition that sees marriage as exactly that, a sacred path to divinity. So, our guide for this exploration comes from the Divine Life Society, which was founded by Swami Sivananda. And this isn't your typical self-help book you'd find today. It's more like a spiritual manual for what they call householders. Regular people living active family lives, showing how that very life can be a path to enlightenment. And this quote, wow, it gets right to the heart of the whole philosophy. Marriage is totally redefined here. It's not just a social contract or even a romantic thing. It's a sacred spiritual partnership. The goal isn't just to be happy together, but to actively help each other evolve spiritually and live a life of virtue, which is known as Dharma. All right, so to really unpack all this, here's our game plan. We're going to look at 5 key ideas. First, marriage as the sacred partnership. Then, the home as a temple. After that, the specific roles and duties for each partner. Then we'll get into daily spiritual practices. And finally, what the ultimate goal of this whole path really is. Okay, let's start with the absolute foundation of this whole thing, the idea of marriage as a sacred partnership. And this isn't just a nice thought. It's actually framed within a very specific and spiritually important stage of life. That stage has a name. It's called the Grihasthashram. Now, don't just think of it as, living in a house. The key idea here is that it's a sacred field for practicing virtue. And that's a huge insight, right? It means your worldly life, your family life, isn't some obstacle to spiritual growth. It's the main arena where it's all meant to happen. And right in the middle of this sacred field, the husband and wife become mutual helpers. Their life together is seen as this grand adventure of spiritual unfoldment. The whole mission for each person is to be the other's biggest supporter on their spiritual journey. So it makes perfect sense that this idea would then extend from the partnership itself to the actual place they share. I mean, if the marriage is a spiritual practice, what does that make the home? Well, according to this guide, it becomes a temple. And this is way more than just a nice metaphor. The guide gives a very direct instruction. Feel that your house is the abode of God. It's calling for this conscious shift in how you see everything, transforming your physical home into a divine space where God is the central focus. So you might be wondering, okay, how do you actually do that? Well, the guide lays out some really concrete actions: praying together, living virtuously, creating harmony, and practicing moderation. The whole point is to intentionally create what it calls a sublime spiritual atmosphere right there within the walls of your own home. Now, to keep this spiritual harmony going, you need some structure. And that brings us to the prescribed roles and duties. This is where the guide gets into some very specific responsibilities for both the husband and the wife. For the wife, these duties are all framed under this concept called Stri Dharma. This term basically covers all the virtues and responsibilities that are seen as essential for a woman within the context of this ideal household. What's interesting is the guide actually references the ancient lawgiver Manu to spell out some of these duties. And they're super practical, really focused on the day-to-day running of the home. We're talking about everything from doing your work cheerfully and keeping things clean to being smart with money and serving your in-laws. But it's not just about practical chores. The source also really emphasizes certain virtues. This quote uses a beautiful metaphor to talk about how important modesty is. It's presented not as some kind of restriction, but as this essential quality that gives a woman's character grace and beauty. Now, and this is really important, this isn't just a list of chores for the wife, not at all. The guide lays out a whole parallel set of responsibilities for the husband. While the wife's role often centers on practical service, the husband's duty is to be the family's spiritual guide. It's on him to help his wife's spiritual growth, take her on pilgrimages, and, this is huge, to treat her like a Devi, which means goddess. Okay, so we've got the sacred space and we have the defined roles. But how does this all actually work on a busy Tuesday afternoon? Let's look at the practical steps for weaving spiritual practice into the fabric of everyday life. The guide is really realistic here. It knows that householders have jobs and kids and a million things to do. So it offers what it calls an easy method of sadhana, which is basically a spiritual practice that's designed to be done right in the middle of all your normal worldly activities. And the method itself is just beautifully simple. Every couple of hours, you just pause for a minute or two, close your eyes, think of the divine, mentally repeat a mantra. But the real magic is in the mindset shift that comes next. Starting to see your own body as a moving temple and viewing every single thing you do, from walking to working, as a sacred offering. This quote just sums up the whole philosophy perfectly, doesn't it? Work is worship. This idea completely dissolves the line between what's sacred and what's secular. Your job, your chores, your daily tasks, all of it becomes a form of meditation, as long as you do it with the right intention. So, we've looked at the foundation, the sacred space, the duties, the daily practices. But where is all this actually supposed to lead? What's the end game here? What is the ultimate goal of structuring your entire life this way? And what's really cool is that the guide asks this very question itself. After giving you all the instructions, it stops and actually defines what it means to live a divine life. So the essence of a divine life, it turns out, is this incredible blend of inner virtue and outer action. It's about being kind and generous and serving others, while also keeping up with your personal practices like meditation, and all of it leads toward this ultimate, unconditional surrender to the divine. And this is the really profound conclusion. In this way of seeing things, married life isn't some distraction from the spiritual path. It is the path. The home, your family life, is transformed into the very gateway to immortality, spiritual perfection, and divine realization. So as we think about this incredible spiritual framework, it kind of leaves us with a big modern question, doesn't it? How can these ideas about spiritual partnership, about duty, about purpose, how can they inform or maybe challenge or even enrich our own relationships today?